The silence of space was deceptive. It looked calm, peaceful even, but war raged in the darkness. Dane Carter's fighter ship was barely holding together. Red warning lights flashed across his cockpit as enemy laser fire tore through his fleet. His squadron was losing. The Araxian warlords, a ruthless alien race, had ambushed them at the edge of the galaxy. Dane dodged another blast, his hands gripping the controls tightly. His ship was damaged, but he wasn't ready to die yet. He locked onto an enemy fighter and fired. The explosion lit up the void for a brief moment before the chaos continued. "Command, I need backup," Dane shouted into his radio. Static was his only response. His heart pounded. He was alone. A massive explosion nearby sent shockwaves through his ship. Dane's controls went dead. His engines flickered and died as his ship spun out of control toward the gravitational pull of a black hole. "No, no, no," he muttered, trying to restart the systems. Nothing worked. His fuel was leaking, and his oxygen levels were dropping fast. The battle was still raging, but his fleet had already abandoned him. Dane's breath grew heavy as his ship drifted closer to the black hole's event horizon. The crushing force of gravity started to pull him in. His vision blurred. His body felt heavy. This was it. He was going to die in the void alone. But then, a bright blue light flashed outside his cockpit. Through the spinning chaos, he saw something massive approaching. A ship larger than anything he had seen before. It was not human. Before he could process what was happening, his ship was caught in a powerful energy beam. His entire fighter trembled as it was pulled toward the alien vessel. His systems were failing, and his consciousness began to fade. The last thing he saw before blacking out was a figure standing over him, tall, armored, with piercing golden eyes. She wasn't human, but she had saved him. And for some reason, Dane had a feeling his life was never going to be the same again. Dane Carter woke up to a strange humming sound. His body felt heavy, his head pounding. The air smelled different, clean, but not like Earth. Slowly, his eyes opened, and he realized he was lying on a metallic bed inside a dimly lit room. His heart raced. Where am I? He tried to sit up, but pain shot through his body. He looked down and saw that his wounds were bandaged with some kind of glowing material. His flight suit was gone, replaced with a thin gray uniform. Someone had treated him. Then he heard footsteps. Dane turned his head and saw her. A tall woman with golden eyes and dark, metallic armor stepped into the room. Her long, braided hair shimmered under the strange blue lights. Her face was strong, elegant, but serious. She wasn't human. Dane's body tensed. He had heard of many alien species, but he had never seen one like her before. She walked closer and studied him with a cold, unreadable expression. "You are awake," she said. Her voice was smooth but firm. Dane didn't reply. His mind was racing. Who is she? Why did she save me? Am I a prisoner? "I am Captain Zara Velcari of the Velzeran Dominion," she continued. "You were dying. I pulled you from the black hole's gravity before it was too late." Dane swallowed hard. He should have been grateful, but he didn't trust her. "Why?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Zara tilted her head slightly. "You fought well against the Araxians. I respect warriors who do not surrender." Dane frowned. That wasn't an answer. Did she save me because she wanted something? "I need to go back," Dane said, trying to sound calm. "My fleet." "Your fleet is gone," Zara interrupted. "Your own people abandoned you. I scanned the battlefield. They marked you as MIA, missing in action. No one came looking for you." Dane's stomach dropped. He didn't want to believe it, but deep down, he knew she was right. His squadron had left him behind. He clenched his fists. "Then take me to the nearest human colony." Zara's golden eyes narrowed. "That is not possible. Your kind does not know of my people. If I return you, it could start a war." Dane's breath caught in his throat. "So what does that mean?" Zara exhaled, as if considering something. You are alive because of me. That makes you my responsibility. Dane's jaw tightened. He didn't like the sound of that. So, I'm a prisoner. Zyra's lips curved slightly. Not quite a smile, but something close. No, you are a guest. For now. Dane didn't know what that meant, but one thing was clear. He was trapped. And his fate was now in the hands of Captain Zyra Velcari. Dane Carter sat on the edge of the metallic bed, staring at the cold floor beneath his feet. His mind was spinning. His fleet had abandoned him. He had no way to contact Earth, and now he was trapped on an alien warship, surrounded by a species he didn't even know existed. He clenched his fists. This can't be happening. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Captain Zyra Velcari entered, her golden eyes watching him closely. She moved with confidence, her dark armor reflecting the dim lights of the room. 2 heavily armed guards stood outside the door, making it clear he wasn't free to leave. You are recovering well, she said, crossing her arms. Dane scoffed. Yeah, thanks for the hospitality. Now, when are you taking me back to human space? Zyra's expression remained unreadable. I already told you, that is not an option. Dane stood up, frustration boiling inside him. You can't just keep me here. I'm not one of your people. I don't belong on this ship. Zyra stepped closer, towering over him. Then tell me, where do you belong, Dane Carter? Her words hit him harder than he expected. He opened his mouth but found no answer. His fleet had left him for dead. Earth wouldn't even know he was alive. Even if he somehow escaped, how could he go back? The military would brand him a deserter, or worse, a traitor for being with an unknown alien species. Zyra studied his face, as if seeing the war in his mind. Her voice softened just slightly. You are not a prisoner here. You are under my protection. That is more than what your own people gave you. Dane gritted his teeth. He hated that she was right. Before he could reply, a sharp alarm blared through the ship. Zyra's communicator buzzed, and she pressed a small device on her wrist. Report. A male voice responded, tense and urgent. Captain, we are being followed. An Araxian hunter ship is closing in. Dane felt a chill crawl up his spine. The Araxians, the same aliens who had attacked his fleet. Zyra turned to him. You wish to leave? Then prove yourself. Show me that you are worth saving. Dane's instincts kicked in. He was a soldier. He had survived against the Araxians before. And now he had a chance to do it again. He met Sarah's gaze. What do you need me to do? A flicker of approval crossed her golden eyes. Come with me, human, she said. Let's see if you truly have nowhere else to go. Dane Carter followed Captain Zyra Velcari down the metallic halls of the warship. The alarms blared, red lights flashing as crew members rushed to their stations. The ship trembled slightly. An Araxian hunter vessel was closing in. Dane had fought the Araxians before. He knew how ruthless they were. If they boarded this ship, there would be no mercy. Zyra led him into a war room, a circular chamber filled with holographic displays. Officers surrounded a large projection of the Araxian ship approaching fast. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Status. Kyra commanded. A female officer with silver markings on her skin turned toward her. The Araxians are demanding we surrender the human. Dane's stomach twisted. They're after me. Zyra's gaze remained steady. They believe you are a valuable prize. A human captured alive. They would use you for leverage against your own people. Dane clenched his fists. He knew exactly what that meant. The Araxians were known for torture, experiments, and mind-breaking interrogation. They wouldn't just kill him. They would destroy him. I'm not going down without a fight, Dane said, determination in his voice. Zyra's lips curved slightly, almost in amusement. Good, because neither am I. She turned to her officers. Prepare for battle. We will not surrender. The crew responded with fierce nods. They weren't just following orders. They were loyal to Zyra. Dane had to admit there was something different about her leadership. It wasn't just about power, it was about honor. The ship shook violently as enemy fire struck the shields. "Captain," a soldier called out, "we need to outmaneuver them. They're locking onto our engines." Syra's golden eyes flickered to Dane. "You know their tactics, human. What would you do?" Dane hesitated for only a moment before stepping closer to the holographic map. Araxians are aggressive, but they rely on intimidation. They expect you to run or surrender. He pointed to a weak spot in their formation. "If we can lure them into this position, we can hit their propulsion systems. They'll be stranded." Zara studied him, then nodded. "You heard him. Prepare the maneuver." The crew moved fast. Dane felt something strange, acceptance. They weren't treating him like a prisoner anymore. They were listening to him. Minutes later, the plan was in motion. The Velzeran warship twisted sharply, dodging incoming blasts. The Araxians, thinking they had the advantage, pursued aggressively. "Now," Syra ordered. Energy cannons fired in perfect synchronization, striking the Araxian ship's engines. A chain reaction of explosions erupted. The enemy vessel shut down, floating helplessly in space. A cheer rose from the crew. Dane let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. Zyra turned to him. "You fight well, human." Dane smirked. "You're not bad yourself, Captain." For the first time, Zyra gave him a small nod of respect. He wasn't just a guest anymore. He was one of them. The battle was over. The Araxian ship floated lifelessly in the dark void, its engines completely disabled. The Velzeran crew moved quickly, scanning for survivors and securing the area. Dane Carter stood beside Captain Syra Valkyrie, watching as her people celebrated their victory. For the first time since waking up on this alien ship, Dane didn't feel like an outsider. He had helped them win. He had proven himself. But Sarah was different. While her crew cheered, she remained quiet, her golden eyes locked on the wreckage in the distance. "You don't look happy," Dane said, crossing his arms. Zyra glanced at him. "Victory comes with a price, human." Dane frowned. "You saved your crew. You stopped the Araxians. What's the problem?" Zyra turned away, her voice low. "The problem is, I should have never been in this position." Dane watched her carefully. There was something in her tone, something deeper than just military strategy. She continued, "The Araxians should not have found us so easily. Someone must have given away our position." Dane's gut tightened. "You're saying there's a traitor on your ship?" Zyra didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to a control panel and brought up a holographic map of their recent movements. "This mission was secret," she said. "Only my highest officers knew our route. Yet the Araxians were waiting for us." Dane looked at the hologram. He wasn't an expert in alien tech, but he had seen enough battle strategies to know when something wasn't right. "If there's a traitor," he said, "they won't stop. They'll try again." Zyra nodded. "That is why I cannot afford weakness." Dane raised an eyebrow. "You think I make you weak?" Zyra turned sharply, her golden eyes glowing under the dim lights. "I think you make me a target." Dane swallowed hard. He understood now. It wasn't just about the battle. Zyra had risked everything by saving him. Some of her own people didn't trust him. Some might even resent her decision to keep him alive. He let out a slow breath. "Then why save me at all?" Zyra's jaw tightened. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. But then she spoke softly. "Because I saw a warrior willing to die fighting," she said. "And that is something I could not ignore." Dane wasn't sure what to say to that. He had spent his whole life fighting for people who left him behind. But now, here was this alien captain, this fierce, disciplined leader, who had chosen to save him when she didn't have to. Maybe, just maybe, he had finally found someone who wouldn't abandon him. But if there really was a traitor on this ship, then things were about to get a whole lot more dangerous. The warship's corridors were silent. But the tension in the air was heavy. The battle was over, but the real fight had just begun. Dane Carter sat in a dimly lit room, staring at the metallic wall. His mind replayed Captain Zyra Velcarry's words. "I cannot afford weakness." He understood now. Saving him had put her in danger. Not from the Araxians, but from someone on this ship. A traitor. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Zyra stepped inside, her golden eyes glowing under the pale blue lights. Her expression was unreadable as she crossed her arms. "You fought well today," she said. Dane scoffed. "So did you." There was a long pause before she spoke again. "I owe you a life debt." Dane frowned. "A what?" Zyra took a slow breath. In Velzeran culture, when a warrior saves the life of another, a debt is formed. It must be repaid, no matter the cost. Dane leaned forward. "Wait, you mean because I helped in the battle, you owe me?" Zyra nodded. "Yes." Dane let out a nervous chuckle. "Okay, well, how about you repay me by taking me back to human space?" Zyra's expression hardened. "No." Dane sighed. "Didn't think so." Zyra stepped closer. "There are only two ways to repay a life debt. The first is to serve you until the debt is fulfilled." Dane's eyes widened. "Wait, are you saying you'd be like my bodyguard?" Zyra nodded. "If you command it, I must protect you with my life." Dane scratched the back of his neck. That sounded insane, having a powerful alien captain as his personal guardian. He could barely process it. "What's the second option?" he asked. Zyra hesitated before answering. "To claim you as part of my clan." Dane blinked. "Your what?" Zyra's gaze locked onto his. "If I claim you, it means you are no longer an outsider. You become one of us. One of mine." Dane's throat went dry. There was something in the way she said it that made his heart race. "So, I either get a personal warrior bodyguard, or I become an alien?" he asked, trying to lighten the mood. Zyra didn't smile. "You would still be human, but you would be bound to me." Dane swallowed hard. The weight of her words sank in. This wasn't just some small cultural rule. This was serious. If he accepted, it would change everything. He looked up at Zyra. "And if I refuse?" Zyra's golden eyes darkened. "Then the debt remains, and others may see it as a weakness to exploit." Dane let out a slow breath. He had a choice to make, and either way, his life would never be the same again. Dane Carter couldn't believe what he was hearing. Claim him as part of her clan. The idea felt impossible. Yet here he was, standing in front of Captain Zyra Velcarry, an alien commander who had saved his life, and was now offering him a bond that could change everything. "I don't need a protector," Dane said, shaking his head. "I can take care of myself." Zyra didn't respond immediately. She just stood there, her eyes glowing with the intensity of someone who had lived through countless battles. Her voice was calm, but the weight of her words carried through the room. "You may not need protection, human," she said, her gaze steady, "but I made an oath to protect those I owe a debt to. It is not about need. It is about honor." Dane felt his frustration rise. He wasn't used to being indebted to anyone. He had always fought alone. And he wasn't about to start depending on someone else now, especially not an alien. "I don't care about your honor, Zyra," he said, his voice a little sharper than he intended. "I didn't ask for this debt, and I didn't ask for your protection." Zyra's golden eyes flickered, but she didn't back down. "I did not ask you to save me either, yet you did." There was a long silence as Dane processed her words. The truth was, he didn't know what he wanted. The Velzeran had given him safety when his own people had abandoned him. They had treated him with respect, even when they had no reason to. And Zyra, despite her cold exterior, had been more loyal to him than anyone from Earth ever had been. But that didn't mean he was ready to kneel to anyone. "I'm not your servant," Dane said firmly, his eyes locking with hers. I won't be anyone's pawn. Zaira studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then, for the first time since they had met, she allowed a small, almost imperceptible smile to form on her lips. You misunderstand, she said softly. I do not want you to kneel. I never said you had to. You are not my subject, but you are under my protection. And that means I will stand by you, whether you wish it or not. Dane felt a knot in his chest, loosened slightly, but he wasn't fully convinced. The weight of her words still pressed on him. What did it mean to be under her protection? What would he be giving up? I don't want to be anyone's burden, he said quietly, his voice softer now. Zaira's gaze softened. You are not a burden, Dane Carter. You are a warrior. And the warrior bond I offer is not a prison. It is a partnership. Dane's mind raced. He hadn't come here to make friends with aliens. He had come to fight, to survive. But now, everything was changing. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the one who was being saved. Maybe he had something to offer her after all. I don't kneel to anyone, Dane said again, this time with more confidence. But I will fight beside you, Captain Zaira Valkyrie. Zaira nodded, her eyes filled with something close to respect. Then stand with me, warrior. The warship's halls hummed with activity, but there was a sense of unease in the air. Since their victory over the Araxian hunter ship, the crew had been on high alert, expecting retaliation. But Dane could sense that something more was brewing beneath the surface. The last few days had been strange. Zaira had become even more distant, her golden eyes constantly scanning the room as if she were looking for something, or someone. It wasn't just the Araxians that were making her cautious. Dane had overheard whispers in the corridors, quiet conversations that stopped as soon as he walked by. There was a tension among the crew that hadn't been there before. Some looked at him with suspicion, others with outright hostility. The idea that there might be a traitor on board, someone who had given away their position to the Araxians, wasn't just a theory anymore. It was a real threat. Captain, we found something, said a voice over the comm system, breaking the uneasy silence. It was Commander Jorik, one of Zaira's most trusted officers. Zaira, who had been standing by the war table, immediately straightened. What have you found, Jorik? There's a coded message that was sent from this ship to the Araxians. It was encrypted, but we've broken it. Dane's stomach tightened. He hadn't heard of any message being sent to the Araxians. His mind raced. If someone had betrayed them, if there was someone on this ship who had helped the enemy, it could be disastrous. Zaira's voice was cold. Who is responsible? We're still tracing the signal, Captain, but it came from one of your officers, Jorik said, his tone tense. It's highly classified. They'd been communicating with the Araxians in secret. Dane's heart skipped a beat. An officer, someone on Xira's crew. Zaira turned to him, her expression hardening. You need to prepare yourself, Dane. We have a traitor on this ship. The weight of her words sank in. Zaira's entire world, her crew, her loyalty, was being torn apart by betrayal. As the crew scrambled to track down the source of the message, Dane couldn't help but feel the sting of what was happening. The captain who had saved him, the captain who had stood by him, was now facing the very thing she had tried to protect him from, betrayal from within. It didn't take long before the suspect was identified. A junior officer by the name of Lieutenant Kell, a young Velzarin who had joined the crew only a few months ago. He had been quiet, always in the background, but Dane had noticed him more than once glancing at him with a strange look. Dane wasn't sure why, but something about the lieutenant had never felt right. The officers quickly detained Kale, and he was brought before Xira. The room was tense as Kale stood before her, his head bowed, hands bound. You were the one who sent the message to the Araxians, Xira said, her voice filled with anger and disappointment. Kale's eyes flickered nervously, but he didn't speak. I gave you a chance, Kale. I trusted you. Xira continued, her voice growing colder. You betrayed all of us. Dane watched as Cal's shoulders slumped, the weight of the betrayal heavy on his mind. The realization hit him. This was more than just a military matter. This was personal for Xyra. This betrayal cut deeper than any wound could. "I will deal with this," Xyra said finally, her tone decisive. She turned to her officers. "Take him away." As the guards led Cal out of the room, Dane couldn't help but feel a deep sense of unease. The warship wasn't just facing an external enemy. The true battle was within, and Xyra's leadership would be tested like never before. The Velzeran warship floated in the cold expanse of space, the quiet hum of the engines the only sound breaking the eerie silence. The crew had dealt with the traitor, Lieutenant Kale, but the air still felt thick with distrust. Even though the immediate danger had passed, the damage had been done. Zura Velkari had lost a trusted officer, and her crew knew the truth. There was a hole in their ranks. Dane Carter stood near the warship's viewing port, looking out at the stars. He had never been a man who worried about politics or loyalty. But standing here, on a foreign ship, surrounded by aliens, everything felt different. He had once been part of a human fleet, part of something bigger. Now, even if he wanted to go back to Earth, he couldn't. Not after what had happened. Thinking about home. Kyra's voice broke through his thoughts. Dane turned to see her approaching, her golden eyes fixed on him. She had been quieter than usual, her usual confidence dimmed by the events of the last few days. The betrayal had shaken her, but Dane could see that she wasn't one to show weakness easily. "I'm just trying to figure out what happens next," he replied, his voice low. Xyra stopped beside him and looked out at the stars as well. "The Araxians will regroup. They will come after us again, but they will never find us weak." Dane nodded, but his mind was still on Earth. He knew the truth now. The humans had abandoned him. They didn't know he was alive, and if they ever did, they would never accept him back. Earth wouldn't want a deserter, especially not one who had allied with an unknown alien species. "If we keep going like this, we're just running," Dane said, his frustration leaking into his words. "Running from the Araxians, running from the truth. What am I supposed to do when this is all over, Xyra? Go back to a place that's forgotten me?" Xyra turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "You would not be returning to nothing, Dane Carter. If you stay, you will have a place with the Velzeran." Dane's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't sure if she was offering him an alliance or something more. The idea of staying with the Velzeran forever seemed impossible, but at the same time, it wasn't the worst option. He would never be accepted back by Earth. He would always be a reminder of the fleet that had abandoned him. "I'm not sure I can stay," he said quietly, looking down at his hands. "I don't want to be someone's burden, Xyra. I don't want to owe anyone. I don't want to be part of some alien culture that I don't understand." Xyra took a step closer to him. Her voice was firm, but there was a softness to it that Dane hadn't heard before. "You misunderstand. I do not ask you to stay as a burden. I ask you to stay as an equal." Dane looked up, surprised by her words. "You saved my life, Dane. You fought for this crew. You have more than earned your place among us." Her eyes softened slightly, but they remained full of determination. "You may not want to be part of the Velzeran, but you are already part of us, and I will not let you go." Dane's breath caught in his chest. He didn't know how to respond. Her words filled him with a strange sense of peace, but also confusion. Could he really abandon his humanity? Could he walk away from the past he had fought so hard to protect? But deep down, Dane knew the truth. There was no returning to Earth. Not now. He looked at Xyra, her golden eyes waiting for him to make a choice. The future, his future, was in his hands. There was only one thing he was sure of now. "No matter what happens, I'm with you," Dane said, his voice steady. Xyra nodded, her gaze softening for a moment before she turned toward the warship's command center. "Then let us face whatever comes next, together." The weight of their new bond settled between them. They were no longer just a captain and a rescued human. They were something more, partners in a fight that was far from over. The warship's engines hummed steadily as it sailed through the void, a silent predator waiting for the next challenge. But in the command center, there was a different kind of tension, an unspoken weight between Captain Zyra Valkyrie and Dane Carter. It had been days since their conversation. Days since Dane had made the decision to stay with the Velzerin, to stand beside Zyra instead of running back to a place that had long forgotten him. And yet, he still couldn't shake the feeling that he was leaving something important behind. Zyra stood at the helm, her posture straight, her eyes scanning the star map projected before her. She had not been the same since the traitor was uncovered. The betrayal had left its mark on her, but she was still the strong, focused captain that Dane had come to respect. Dane watched her, feeling the weight of his own choice pressing down on him. He had pledged to fight with her, but now, it was more than just fighting. It was about a future, and that future had become uncertain as they faced new threats from the Orcs and the mysterious forces that seemed to be closing in on them. "Captain, we've detected movement," one of the officers called from the communication station. Zyra's attention snapped to the report. Her face hardened. "Are they Orcs?" "No," the officer replied. "Not Orcs. Unknown vessels. They're moving fast, and they're heading directly for us." Dane stepped forward, instinctively taking a position beside Zyra. She didn't look at him, but he knew that she was aware of his presence. She was the captain, but they had become more than just allies in the last few days. "What are we looking at?" Dane asked, his voice calm. Zyra's gaze narrowed as she examined the data. "We don't know yet, but if they're hostile, they will not be able to outrun us." Dane nodded. He didn't need to ask what that meant. If this new threat was dangerous, they would fight, and they would fight together. Minutes passed, each one feeling like an eternity. Dane's heart raced, his hand instinctively reaching for his sidearm. He didn't know what was coming, but he was ready. Finally, the mysterious vessels came into view. They were sleek and silent, their dark forms cutting through the stars like predators. But to Dane's surprise, they didn't attack. Instead, they slowed, circling the warship with calculated precision. Zyra stepped forward, her voice steady. "Identify yourselves. You are entering Velzerin space." A transmission flickered on the screen. The figure that appeared was humanoid but clearly alien. Tall, with dark blue skin and glowing white eyes. "We are the Nerath, allies of the Velzerin. We come with an offer of peace." Dane exchanged a glance with Zyra, who appeared cautious but intrigued. This wasn't an attack. It was a message. "We have no interest in conflict," the Nerath continued, their voice calm. "We seek a mutual alliance." Zyra's eyes flickered with interest. An alliance could be exactly what they needed, especially after everything that had happened. But there was something more in her gaze, a realization that they were no longer just trying to survive. They were beginning to build something new. Dane felt it too. This wasn't just about fighting anymore. This was about shaping the future, and he realized, for the first time, that he didn't have to be alone. He stepped beside Zyra. "We'll listen," he said, "but only because you've shown us that not all alliances come at a price." Zyra turned to him, her golden eyes meeting his with a softness he had never seen before. The weight of their past decisions, their struggles, seemed to settle between them in that quiet moment. "Together, we will face whatever comes," she said softly. Dane nodded. They were no longer just two people trying to survive in the cold void of space. They were partners, allies, and for the first time in a long while, he felt like he had a place, not just in the universe, but beside her, forever.